The Silence Protocol. The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Kepler 442 bits had been silent for 3 rotations when Commander Vextar finally received the transmission he had been waiting for. The holographic display flickered to life in his command chamber, showing the unmistakable blue marble that the scout ships had discovered in the outer rim of this small galaxy. "Commander," the voice of Scout Leader Kixrun crackled through the quantum communicator. "We have confirmed the presence of intelligent life on the 3rd planet of this system. They call themselves humans, and their planet Earth." Vextar leaned back in his bioformed command chair, his 4 arms crossing in satisfaction. After 17 successful conquests across the galaxy, the Zephyrian Empire had become the most feared force in known space. Their biomechanical ships could strip entire planets of resources in mere cycles, and their advanced weaponry had never met any resistance they couldn't overcome within hours. "Population?" Vextar asked, his voice carrying the authority that had conquered entire star systems. "Approximately 7 billion sentient beings, Commander. They appear to be a single species with minor genetic variations. Technology level is primitive. They have barely achieved interplanetary travel, and their weapons are based on crude chemical propulsion." Vextar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for Zephyrian laughter. 7 billion beings sounded like a substantial workforce once they were properly subdued. The Empire always needed more workers for the mining operations in the Andromeda sector. "Any signs of advanced defensive capabilities?" "Negative, Commander. Their most powerful weapons appear to be fusion-based explosives, primitive electromagnetic pulse devices, nothing that could penetrate our bioshields or damage our living hull technology." On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen was having the worst day of her career. The radio telescope array of the Atacama Desert had been receiving strange signals for the past week, and every analysis she ran came back with the same impossible conclusion. The signals were artificial, highly organized, and definitely not from Earth. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the data streaming across her monitors for the 1000th time. The mathematical progressions were too complex to be natural phenomena, too structured to be random cosmic radiation. Someone or something was out there, and they were trying to communicate. "Sarah, you need to see this." Her research partner, Dr. James Liu, burst into the monitoring station with his tablet in hand. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled excitement and fear. "What is it, James?" "I've been running the signal patterns through our linguistic analysis software. The computer has been trying to decode any possible language structures." James swiped his tablet screen and showed her a translation matrix. "Sarah, I think they're not trying to communicate with us. I think they're talking about us." Sarah looked at the partial translation on the screen. Words like conquest, resources, and subjugation appeared multiple times. Her blood ran cold as she realized what they might be witnessing. "James, we need to contact the Defense Department immediately." 3 hours later, Sarah and James found themselves in an underground briefing room at NORAD, facing a room full of military officials who looked like they hadn't slept in days. At the head of the table sat Captain Marcus Stone, a decorated Air Force officer who had been quietly building Earth's first serious space defense program. "Dr. Chen," Captain Stone said, his voice steady despite the circumstances, "show us what you found." Sarah activated her presentation, and the room filled with the eerie sounds of the alien transmissions. As she explained her analysis, she watched the faces around the table grow increasingly grim. "Based on our analysis," Sarah concluded, "we believe we're dealing with a spacefaring civilization that has done this before. The signal pattern suggests they're conducting reconnaissance and planning some kind of military operation." General Patricia Walsh, the highest-ranking officer present, leaned forward. "How long do we have?" "The transmission patterns suggest they're moving closer. Based on the signal strength increases, I estimate they'll be in our solar system within 72 hours. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. Earth had no meaningful space defense capabilities. The International Space Station was barely equipped for scientific research, let alone military engagement. Humanity's most advanced spacecraft could barely reach Mars, while these aliens appeared to have traveled between star systems. Captain Stone stood up slowly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to propose something that will sound insane. But given what we're facing, insane might be our only option." He walked to the wall display and brought up a world map showing communication networks, power grids, and population centers. "What if we don't fight them the way they expect us to fight?" "What do you mean?" asked General Walsh. "Every conquest in human history has followed predictable patterns. The stronger force attacks, the weaker force either surrenders or resists with conventional tactics, and the stronger force wins. But what if we don't play by those rules?" Stone highlighted major communication hubs around the world. "What if instead of panicking, instead of mobilizing armies, instead of doing anything they might expect, we do the one thing that no intelligent species has probably ever done when faced with conquest? Which is, we go completely silent." The room erupted in confused voices, but Stone continued. "Think about it. They're expecting panic, desperate communications, military mobilization, surrender negotiations. What if they get none of that? What if Earth simply stops talking?" Dr. Chen understood immediately. Psychological warfare. They can't predict or counter what they can't understand. "Exactly. We've intercepted their communications, which means we know they're coming. But they don't know that we know. We have 72 hours to implement what I'm calling the silence protocol. Over the next 18 hours, a plan that would have been impossible just decades ago came together with stunning speed. The Internet, which had connected the world's population like never before, became the tool for the most coordinated human effort in history. Every government received the same message simultaneously. Every military leader, every communication company, every broadcast network, every social media platform. The message was simple. In 54 hours, Earth would go silent. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. At precisely 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, all non-essential communication would cease. Television broadcasts would end mid-sentence. Radio stations would go dead. Internet traffic would drop to zero. Cell phone towers would shut down. Even international shipping would halt. To any observer, Earth would appear to have suddenly died. Meanwhile, Commander Vextar was reviewing the final reconnaissance reports from his scout ships. The human planet appeared even more primitive than initially reported. Their communication networks were chaotic and inefficient, their military forces were scattered and uncoordinated, and their technology was laughably outdated. "Admiral Kethrel," Vextar transmitted to the Imperial flagship, "the third planet will require minimal force to subdue. I recommend standard conquest protocol. Issue ultimatum. Allow panic period for psychological breakdown. Then commence resource extraction operations." The response came swiftly. "Proceed, Commander. The Empire expects efficient completion." Vextar activated the planet-wide communication array. This was his favorite part of any conquest. The moment when a species realized their entire existence was about to change forever. "Inhabitants of the third planet," his voice boomed across every radio frequency Earth used for communication. "I am Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our galactic domain." On Earth, the message was received by every radio telescope, every communication satellite, and every listening station on the planet. But by the time the message finished transmitting, something unprecedented happened. Earth stopped responding. "You have 72 of your rotational periods to establish communication channels and begin surrender negotiations. Failure to respond will result in the implementation of standard conquest protocols. Your compliance is not optional." Vextar waited for the response. In his 17 previous conquests, this was the moment when the target species would flood the communication channels with desperate pleas, angry defiance, or panicked attempts at negotiation. Minutes passed, then hours, then a full rotation. Earth remained completely silent. Scout Leader Kixrun, Vextar transmitted, "Are you certain the inhabitants received our transmission?" "Confirmed, Commander." The signal reached every major population center, but we're detecting something unusual. "Explain." "Their communication networks have gone completely offline. All of them. Simultaneously." Vextar's biomechanical chair shifted beneath him as he processed this information. In 17 conquests, he had never encountered a species that simply stopped communicating entirely. "Technical malfunction." "Negative, Commander. The shutdown appears to be coordinated and intentional. They're still generating power, still maintaining basic infrastructure, but all long-range communication has ceased." For the first time in his military career, Commander Vextar felt something he had never experienced before during a conquest operation: uncertainty. On Earth, the silence protocol was working better than anyone had dared hope. In cities around the world, populations had gathered in predetermined locations. Schools, community centers, and public buildings had become coordination hubs. Without electronic communication, humans were relying on something that had served them for thousands of years before the invention of the telephone: direct, face-to-face organization. Captain Stone stood in the emergency command center buried beneath Cheyenne Mountain, watching reports come in through the only communication network still operating: a hardwired military system that used no radio frequencies the aliens could detect. "Report from Europe," called out Lieutenant Rebecca Torres. "All major cities have implemented local coordination. Population movement complete." "Asia." "Confirmed. China, Japan, India, and Southeast Asia all report successful transition to Protocol 7. "Americas." "North and South America fully coordinated. Indigenous communities are providing guidance on non-electronic communication methods." Dr. Chen looked up from her monitoring station. "Captain, we're still receiving alien transmissions. They're repeating the ultimatum, but there's something else." The tone has changed. "Changed how?" "They sound confused. Maybe even concerned." Stone nodded. Confusion was exactly what they were hoping for. Throughout human history, the most effective military strategies have been those that opponents couldn't predict or understand. The silence protocol was designed to be completely incomprehensible to a species that had conquered 17 other civilizations using standard intimidation tactics. "How long until their deadline expires?" Stone asked. 56 hours and counting." "Good. Maintain the silence. Let them wonder what kind of species simply disappears when threatened." Above Earth's atmosphere, the Zephyrian fleet had grown to include 12 conquest vessels, each one capable of reducing a continent to rubble. But as the deadline approached, Commander Vextar found himself facing a problem he had never encountered before. How do you conquer a species that won't acknowledge your existence? The awakening storm. The 72-hour deadline had passed in complete silence. Commander Vextar stared at the blue planet rotating peacefully below his bioship, more frustrated than he had ever been in his distinguished military career. Standard conquest protocol required the target species to either surrender or resist, but Earth had done neither. "Commander," Scout Leader Kixrun transmitted from his reconnaissance vessel, "we have completed detailed scans of the planet's surface. The results are unprecedented. Report. The human population appears to have abandoned their major cities. We're detecting minimal activity in metropolitan areas, but massive population concentrations in rural and underground locations. It's as if they've deliberately removed themselves from potential target zones." Vextar's 4 arms gestured in annoyance. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of growing agitation that his crew had learned to recognize and fear. "Are they hiding?" "Unknown, Commander. Their behavior doesn't match any conquest scenario in our databases. We have successfully subdued species that fought desperately, species that surrendered immediately, and species that attempted diplomatic negotiation. But we have never encountered a species that simply disappeared." Admiral Kethral's holographic image materialized in Vextar's command chamber. The Supreme Admiral's biomechanical augmentations were more extensive than most Zephyrians, making his already intimidating appearance truly frightening. But even he looked perplexed. "Commander, the Imperial Council is growing impatient. 17 successful conquests have given you an exceptional reputation. Explain why a primitive species is causing delays." Vextar straightened in his command chair. "Admiral, the humans are employing a strategy we have never encountered. They have neither surrendered nor mounted conventional resistance. Instead, they have made themselves invisible. Invisible. Their communication networks remain offline. Their major population centers appear abandoned. Yet our sensors indicate the population is still alive and has relocated to positions we cannot easily target without causing massive ecological damage to the planet itself." Admiral Kethral's augmented eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting they are using their own planet as a shield?" "It appears that way, Admiral. If we use standard bombardment tactics, we will destroy the very resources we came to harvest. Then land ground forces and flush them out." "Yes, Admiral." Within 6 hours, Zephyrian dropships were descending through Earth's atmosphere. Each ship carried 50 biowarriors, genetically engineered soldiers designed for pacification operations. Their mission was simple: locate human populations and force them into submission. The first dropship landed in what had once been Times Square in New York City. Biowarriors emerged onto empty streets that should have been filled with millions of humans. Instead, they found abandoned vehicles, open storefronts with no one inside, and an eerie silence that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Squad leader Zaxxon activated his communication array. "Command, we have landed in major population center. No resistance encountered. Also no population encountered." Similar reports came in from landing sites around the world: London, Tokyo, Paris, Beijing, Moscow. All major cities appeared to have been voluntarily evacuated. The Zephyrian forces found themselves occupying empty urban landscapes, waiting for an enemy that didn't seem to exist. But beneath the cities, in subway tunnels and sewer systems, in basement networks and underground parking structures, millions of humans were moving with purpose. The Silence Protocol had been just the first phase of Captain Stone's plan. 3 kilometers beneath Manhattan, in a repurposed subway maintenance facility, Dr. Sarah Chen was coordinating with resistance cells around the world through a communication network that the aliens couldn't detect because it didn't exist in any form they understood. "London reports successful Phase 2 implementation," whispered James Liu, reading from a hand-delivered message that had traveled through a chain of runners stretching across the Atlantic Ocean via cargo ships that had maintained radio silence. "Tokyo. Confirmed. Beijing confirms. Moscow confirms. All major cities report alien forces have landed and are attempting to locate populations." Captain Stone looked up from a map covered in hand-drawn tactical symbols. "Time to show them what humans do when we're cornered." The resistance strategy was unlike anything in military history because it wasn't really military at all. Instead of trying to fight the technologically superior Zephyrian forces directly, humans had turned their entire civilization into something the aliens couldn't understand or predict. In London, former computer programmer Emma Watson was leading a group of 40 people through abandoned underground tunnels. But they weren't hiding. They were hunting. Emma had spent her career designing video game artificial intelligence, and now she was applying those same principles to real-world tactical scenarios. "Remember," she whispered to her team, "we don't want to kill them if we can avoid it. We want to confuse them, frustrate them, and make them question everything they think they know about conquest." Her team had spent the past 3 days converting everyday objects into psychological warfare tools. Security cameras had been reprogrammed to project holographic images. Motion sensors had been connected to speaker systems. Even automatic doors had been modified to open and close in patterns designed to suggest the presence of large numbers of people where none existed. When the first Zephyrian patrol entered the London Underground, they encountered something their training had never prepared them for. Lights flickered in sequences that seemed to indicate movement, but their biosensors detected no life forms. Doors opened and closed as if beings were passing through them, but thermal imaging showed nothing. Voices echoed through the tunnels speaking in human languages, but the sounds came from empty spaces. Squad leader Vaktul reported back to his dropship commander. "We are encountering systematic technical malfunctions. Equipment is behaving erratically. Possible electromagnetic interference from human technology." But it wasn't electromagnetic interference. It was Emma Watson and her team of former video game designers who had turned the London Underground into the world's largest augmented reality experience, designed specifically to drive alien invaders to distraction. In New York, former Broadway lighting designer Marcus Rodriguez had transformed the subway system into something even more disorienting. Using his knowledge of theatrical effects, Marcus had created an environment where nothing was what it seemed to be. Mirrors created infinite corridors that led nowhere. Projected shadows suggested the movement of large groups of people. Sound systems created acoustic illusions that made footsteps seem to come from impossible directions. The Zephyrian bio-warriors were trained to handle armed resistance, desperate civilians, and conventional military tactics. They were not prepared to deal with an enemy that seemed to exist in the spaces between reality and illusion. But the most effective aspect of the human resistance wasn't the technology, it was the coordination. While the aliens were trying to understand the strange phenomena in the tunnels beneath major cities, humans throughout the world were implementing Phase 3 of Captain Stone's plan. In small towns and rural areas that the aliens had ignored, humans were rapidly converting civilian infrastructure into military assets. Farm equipment was being modified into mobile weapons platforms. Industrial machinery was being repurposed for manufacturing ammunition and defensive systems. Communication networks that relied on technologies too primitive for the aliens to detect, like ham radio and even carrier pigeons, were coordinating activities across entire continents. Dr. Chen received reports that would have been impossible to believe just weeks earlier. Farmers in Iowa had converted combined harvesters into armored vehicles. Factory workers in Detroit had retooled automobile assembly lines to produce drone swarms. Scientists in rural research stations had developed weapons based on agricultural pesticide delivery systems that could cover vast areas with substances designed to interfere with Zephyrian biotechnology. Most remarkably, indigenous communities around the world had become the backbone of the resistance communication network. Native American tribes, Aboriginal Australians, and indigenous peoples of Africa and South America had provided knowledge of long-distance communication methods that required no electronic technology at all. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres reported, "we're receiving confirmation from all continents. Phase 3 is complete. Human population has successfully transitioned from urban concentration to distributed resistance networks." Stone looked at his tactical display, which now showed not an invasion scenario, but something closer to a planetary immune response. Earth's human population had reorganized itself into a form that was impossible for the aliens to target effectively. "Commander Vexstar is requesting communication," reported the radio operator. Stone nodded. After 72 hours of complete silence, it was time for Earth to speak again. The transmission that reached the Zephyrian command ship was unlike any surrender or resistance communication they had ever received. Captain Stone's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Commander Vexstar, this is Captain Marcus Stone, speaking for the people of Earth. We have received your ultimatum and given it careful consideration." Vexstar activated his response array immediately. Finally, the humans were ready to negotiate their surrender. "Captain Stone, you will direct your population to report to designated processing centers immediately, or face the consequences of continued resistance." "Commander, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not resisting your conquest. We're demonstrating why conquest of Earth is impossible." "Explain." "Over the past 72 hours, your forces have occupied empty cities, while our entire population has reorganized into a distributed network that exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. You cannot target us without destroying the planet you came to harvest. You cannot locate us because we are not hiding. We have become the terrain itself." Stone paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "But more importantly, Commander, we've been studying your technology during this time." In his command chamber, Vextar felt the first stirring of something he had never experienced during a conquest operation: genuine concern. "While your bio-warriors were investigating empty subway tunnels, our scientists were analyzing the quantum signatures of your ship's propulsion systems. While your forces were searching abandoned buildings, our engineers were reverse engineering your communication protocols. We know how your ships work, Commander, and we've learned how to disrupt them." As if to demonstrate, every Zephyrian ship in Earth's orbit suddenly experienced simultaneous system failures. Not catastrophic failures, just enough to prove that the humans had somehow gained access to their control systems. "This is impossible," Vextar transmitted. "Your technology is primitive. You cannot interface with Zephyrian biomechanical systems." "You're correct that our technology is primitive, Commander. But what you fail to understand is that primitive doesn't mean ineffective. It means adaptable. While you've been perfecting conquest techniques that work against advanced civilizations, we've been developing survival techniques that work against impossible odds." Dr. Chen, monitoring the transmission from her underground command post, smiled as she watched the data streams showing Zephyrian ship systems coming back online. The disruption had been temporary, but the message was clear. Humanity had capabilities the aliens hadn't anticipated.